In some of the videos that I've been talking about things that are happening on the conservative side, I've spoken of a black conservative civil war. Let me be clear. The right is not the only side experiencing disagreement and intense disagreement. There is a war between progressives that has been brewing for quite a while. And if you're not familiar with it, let me fill you in on some of the things that have been happening. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. So, on the left, there is a major rift right now. Some of the names involved, the Young Turks, Jimmy Dore, and now Kyle Kulinski. Let's go back to the beginning to kind of talk about some of the things that have happened and how this happened. Jimmy Dore is a comedian, left-leaning, who used to be on the Young Turks show. Young Turks, if you don't know, huge platform, over 5 million viewers, considered far left. But of course, if you're far enough right, everything to the left of you is far left. But they do consider themselves far left. But this is what's interesting, that there are people on the left who do not consider the Young Turks far left enough. Jimmy Dore is now one of these people, but at one point he was on the show and he was a regular contributor. Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk also has a huge platform. Him and Cenk Uygur are co-founders of Justice Democrats. The Justice Democrats are the reason why AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and others are in Congress. So while Jimmy Dore was on the Young Turks, he would have his own perspective. A lot of times they were in alignment on issues, but there were certain issues that they weren't in agreement on. One of those issues was Russiagate. Cenk Uygur and the channel generally were in favor of Russiagate and considered it to be an actual scandal and potentially accurate scandal of what was motivating Trump. Jimmy Dore, among other people on the left, didn't buy it. They felt it was just a smokescreen, an attempt to smear, unjustifiably smearing and dismissing Donald Trump and his agenda. Despite that, Jimmy Dore got along with the Young Turks by all appearances, and ultimately Jimmy Dore left the show. But even when Jimmy Dore left, it didn't become hostile. In fact, there's an episode I remember seeing of Jimmy Dore after he's left talking about his great relationship with the people at the Young Turks and how sad, like it almost seems as if he's close to tears while he's doing this, about he's sad that he's no longer at the Young Turks. So there was still goodwill between them. However, more disagreements started to creep up. One of those disagreements is the 2020 election. During the 2020 election, a lot was at stake. And we're not even talking about Trump versus Biden. We're talking about when Bernie was in the race. So Bernie supporters were clearly all in for Bernie. They wanted to see him win. And these included, people at the Young Turks, people at, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kulinski. I remember watching Kyle Kulinski's coverage. He was, so hopeful for Bernie Sanders. And a lot of people on the left were. Ultimately, though, certain people started having problems with the way Bernie Sanders' campaign was being run. Some of those criticisms then began being directed at Bernie Sanders and his entire motivation. There were those who felt that if Bernie Sanders wasn't going to be the nominee, then they weren't going to just support whoever the Democratic candidate was. Young Turks felt, no, even if it's Biden, you support the Democrat because that's light years better than Donald Trump. There was sometimes that somebody like Cenk would seem critical of anybody who didn't agree with him. In other words, if anybody didn't agree that they should vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump, as opposed to not voting at all or voting for a third-party candidate, he would he had some serious criticism and he would actually call out their credentials as being on the left. Among other things, Jimmy Dore was very admiring of Tulsi Gabbard. And there are people on the left who would say Tulsi Gabbard is not left-leaning. She doesn't support the policies we want. And, Like, I don't know why people are so enamored with her. Funny enough that there's people on the right who had the same criticism, because there are people on the right who's like, oh, we love Tulsi Gabbard. She keeps it real. And I think that a lot of the admiration of Tulsi Gabbard was because of her enmity with Hillary Clinton. So there were people on the far left and people on the right who hated Hillary Clinton so much that because Tulsi Gabbard was her enemy, they liked her automatically. But even at this point, it didn't become overtly hostile. When Force the Vote happened, that's when things really started getting out of control. After the 2020 election, Biden was declared the winner. The Democrats retained the House, ultimately won the Senate. But what was key was what would happen in the House, who would be the next speaker. There were those on the left that felt the progressives within Congress needed to use pressure and leverage for the vote for speaker in order to get concessions from the Democratic Party. Now, back to what the purpose of the Justice Democrats were. The Justice Democrats were co-founded by Cenk Uygur and Cal Kalinske, as well as two other individuals. But the purpose of the Justice Democrats was to basically take over the Democratic Party with far left progressives. And their objective was to get leftists, far left progressives, into Congress and to push further and further left for certain policies like Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage nationally, and other policies. But they were also going to start primarying more and more, center, moderate, conservative Democrats to get them out of office and put Justice Democrats into office to make sure that this happened. So back to the vote for Speaker of the House. There were many on the left who felt this was the opportunity. This was the leverage they needed to get certain policies at least onto the floor, because they didn't think they could necessarily win, but they wanted these policies up for vote on the floor so they could clearly establish who was in support of them and who was against them. One of these policies was Medicare for all. They wanted people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of the squad, including the newly elected members of the squad, Cori Bush, one of them, to hold their votes as leverage in order to get a floor vote on Medicare for all. These criticisms were not just directed amongst them. They were actively petitioning AOC and others to actually do this as the vote for the Speaker of the House was coming up. AOC famously in this dispute, decided not to directly address Jimmy Dore, who was one of the most vocal proponents of Force the Vote, but she subtweeted about him and, basically said something like, well, this isn't popular, this isn't going to work. And Justin Jackson from the NFL actually responded to her and began a back and forth where she made some claims that were directly contrary to earlier positions. This led people like Jimmy Dore to criticize AOC, other lawmakers, and people on the left who were not in favor of Force the Vote, to not only criticize their strategy, not only criticize what they're advocating for, but to start criticizing their motivation. Because now he was calling out certain people as being shills, as being not really being in favor of these left-leaning policies, not really being in favor, just speaking lip service to serve their bottom line. In the case of AOC, she was just saying that to get voted into power, and then she was willing to play ball with the establishment, whatever they wanted to do. He also made these criticisms of people like the Young Turks. The Young Turks, in turn, were criticizing Jimmy Dore and other proponents of Force the Vote as not knowing the actual procedures, not being politically illiterate, and not acting in good faith, and not speaking out in good faith. In fact, the Young Turks actually criticized Jimmy Dore as being a tool of the right. That's what sets the stage for something bigger and something that is much uglier than just a policy discussion. But you see, I talk about this because there's a lesson here. There are actually a lot of lessons here. And one of them is the left is not a monolith. Neither is the right. So we can sit on any side of the aisle or no side, and we can have this idea in our mind that, oh, all of the people on that side think this way. That's simplistic, that's reductionist, and it accomplishes nothing, nor does it inform us on reality. But it makes things easier so that we can dismiss everybody who has this particular label as being this type of person. Right now, we're seeing on both the right and the left divides amongst people who are similarly labeled. And there may be things that we criticize about this side that isn't true to everybody who identifies as being on this side. Nuance is needed. It's time to stop reacting to just simple labels and actually understanding what individuals are in support of, are not in support of, and what they want out of the world. You see, even amongst these movements, there will be disagreements. There will be disagreements about the ultimate outcome. There will be disagreements on how to get there. There will be disagreements based on character, personality, and many other things. If we're not willing to look at the nuance, we won't see the bigger picture. Now, I will be going into more detail in another video. I don't want this to go too long, but as much as the situation on the right, as evidenced by, Kim Klacik, Candace Owens, has gotten ugly, the situation on the left is really, really ugly right now. And I'll be talking about that in a future video. As always, don't forget to give me the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I'm not left or right. I am a truly independent thinker. If you're like me, hit that subscribe button. If you disagree with me, if you only want to play for a team and you don't want to think too hard about the issues, go ahead and hit that thumbs down button and tell me why you don't like thinking for yourself in the comment section. And I'll address it either in the comment section or in a future video. I'll see you next time.